Herbert Sherman Gorman was an American writer and critic. Born in 1893 in Springfield, Massachusetts, the son of Thomas Jeremy Gorman and Mary Longway. He attended technical high school but did not have the money to attend university, instead reading extensively to fill in his education. In 1912 he briefly worked as a vaudeville actor, but without success or, according to Gorman, talent. In 1915 he was hired by the Springfield Republican newspaper as a book reviewer. In 1916 he was summoned to be a propaganda writer for the Liberty Loan Publicity Bureau, and in 1918 he would move to Manhattan to work on the New York Sun. In 1921 he married John Wright. Around 1923 the pair would stay at the MacDowell Colony for Artists in Peterborough, New Hampshire. Afterwards, the Gormans would host many of New York's literary luminaries, like Theodore Dreiser and Thomas Wolfe, for parties where those assembled would get drunk very often despite prohibition. In 1928, Gorman left his career in newspapers behind and went on a tour of Europe, where he met James Joyce while visiting France. Gorman had already written essays and a short biography on Joyce, and their meetings would end in Gorman penning James Joyce his first 40 years, which, however, was continuously refused permission to go to print by Joyce, who made a nigh infinite amount of corrections and explanations he wished to be incorporated into the book. In 1932 he divorced his first wife and married Clara Crawford, the two having one daughter. During the Second World War, Gorman stayed in Mexico and died in 1954 in Houstonville, New York. Gorman began his writing career as a poet, before turning to fiction. He wrote historical novels, but his biggest success was Susie, a contemporary romance, which was made into a film starring Cary Grant. However, Gorman's reputation lives on chiefly via his biography of James Joyce, rather than any of his fiction. That is, aside from The Place Called Dagon, a novel of the satanic and blasphemous, published in 1927, remaining somewhat in the public memory thanks to its mention in Lovecraft's supernatural horror in literature. We see Dr. Dream, physician in the farming country around Marlborough, being awakened in the middle of the night to go and patch up Jeffrey Westcott, a farmer who had done himself an injury. The Westcotts never call on the doctor or anyone else for that matter. Their farm is avoided by grown men and children alike, with the family keeping no friends or even casual acquaintances. Westcott, surrounded by a library of occult tomes, tells Dream he shot himself while conducting an experiment. He even sees Westcott's wife, who fascinates him in a weird way, while the niece of his housekeeper does so in the expected way. Confused, he decides to visit his predecessor, the immensely fat old Humphrey Lathrop, to discuss how there is something dark emanating from the very air and soil of Marlborough. Humphrey drops hints of the Westcott's family's shady past, and is sent from the infamous Uriah Carrier, blackbirder, thief and worse. Soon after, Wagner, the wolf-like servant from the Westcott farm, summons him to a secret meeting with Martha Westcott, who tells him of her loneliness and how her husband is buying old books from Europe and is creating a new religion with a god fashioned in his own image. It turns out Jeffrey Westcott, exerting strange control over the people and not shy to murder his own, is enacting strange rituals to old gods at the place called Dagon. Speaking of the man whose feet are rooted like mountains, in a series of events tied to the Salem witch trials and beyond.